Good morning and welcome back to the last class for commercial radio. So this is the last lecture on buying, selling and scheduling airtime. So part 10 of 10. And if you want to follow along in your handbook, today we're looking at page 398 up until page 402 in Next Level Radio. So in the previous class, we looked at how to write a copy. So if you want to write an advert, how would you do it? How would you go about it? All the different elements involved. The lecture before that, we looked at design thinking, which is also about writing great copies, okay, for radio. Today, however, what we're going to be looking at is the inventory and the scheduling side of it and the traffic side, as well as how to add value. So what we do in the radio world with regards to adding value, and PCA, which is a post-campaign analysis. So the end of this whole thing, okay? So we've gone through everything from the beginning with regards to the different types of content that you can sell, through the whole selling process, to agencies, to different media channels, how it works, how you'll book it. So now we're closer to the end. Okay, so like I said, page 398. Inventory scheduling and integrating advertising into the computer system are key concepts involved in the placing of commercial and programming content, which we place into a commercial or a programming schedule. Okay, so you place your inventory into a schedule. What is inventory? It's our ads in essence. So this whole process is about making sure all the elements end up on the air. That's what we're doing here, and that they are heard when they should be playing, which means at the right time for the audience to respond most effectively. So we have someone, a traffic scheduler, who literally sits in the afternoons or whenever they want to, or whenever they sit, takes all the new ads that have come through and puts them onto the system at the correct times that they should be playing. So commercial inventory is the available space that a radio station has to flight advertising or commercials or spots, whatever you want to call them. Programming inventory, on the other side, is the available on-air space for content that is not commercial to be delivered. Okay, so we have commercial inventory and we have programming inventory. Booking, scheduling, and billing and reporting on the sales and commercial inventory are important from a commercial perspective. Why? Because we want to get paid. Inventory is the number of available packages of airtime that the station has. So imagine you walk into a store and there are products on their shelves, correct? So what is the whole aim? You need to sell the products that are on those shelves. Let's say you walk into Checkers to go and do your grocery shopping. All the products on those shelves are for sale, okay? And they need to sell all those products. When our inventory is fully sold out, our shelves are empty. I remember last year when news of the lockdown started breaking, everyone went to the shop to buy a lot of food, to stock up on toilet paper and everything that you can think of. And the shelves were pretty much empty at a point, right? So this is what we want. We want to make sure that our inventory is sold out. So many powerful and highly flexible software programs are on the market to help with these processes. Most radio stations, or all commercial radio stations, most community radio stations have programs like these. If we look at a simplified step-by-step guide, what we're sitting with at this point is a ready-to-play radio commercial, okay? Because we've done the studio work for the advert and we've done the editing. The editing is complete, okay? So now it just has to go to air. The client then has to decide which airtime schedule on a radio station would be ideal for the commercial. Where do they want this thing to play? What times? What shows? Once an ideal airtime schedule is negotiated between the client and the radio station's sales representative, a contract will be signed between the two parties. Okay, there's always a contract involved. Both the radio station sales representative and the client have to agree to the terms and conditions of the contract. The contract will then define the dates when the advert needs to run and the commercial terms of the campaign. This contract is then plotted on an airtime schedule. So this contract might say things like, we need the ad 5 days prior to it flighting, or the specific ad cannot flight between these and these times because it's an alcohol brand, whatever it might be. Okay, so all the terms and conditions will be negotiated and put here within the contract. So now once we know this booking is completely confirmed and you have your purchase order number or your CI number or whatever it is, just to show that it has been loaded, so there will be a payment. The schedule and the recorded and produced ad is then sent internally to an inventory manager or the traffic manager, as I call him. Their job is to match the multiple contracts and schedules and to place them into a playout schedule or a log. Okay. Software programs can streamline this process and allow, for example, an inventory manager to have multiple logs open at the same time and to process logs spanning multiple days. So you have a music log and you have your traffic log. Okay, so the music log will show the day's songs for every single hour. The schedule log, the playout schedule, the traffic log, whatever you want to call it, will show all the ads that will be played. Okay, and then these two will at a point be merged together to form one playout schedule to play for the following day or the following couple of days. So when a traffic manager creates a log, they first define the groups of the advertisers and then aim to correctly place them in the right order to avoid conflicts in the scheduling, okay? Because you can't have two similar brands right back to back. So for example, you can't have a Coke and a Pepsi, Coca-Cola and a Pepsi ad back to back. So the traffic manager will need to ensure that they are placed at different spaces on this schedule. The traffic manager also needs to try to avoid sensitivities or conflicts of interest through scheduling appropriate commercials and programs together. In addition, they can maximize the topics and content provided by the programming of the station towards the needs of the client. So for example, coming straight out of a traffic report might serve a car brand advert better than it does an advert for beer or for any alcohol. Why? Because flighting an alcohol brand right after you played or right after you've been speaking about the traffic reports might create a negative association of drinking and driving, okay, which is something we're trying to stay away from. We're trying to stay clear from. The traffic manager can then schedule the car brand advert rather in position 1 of the advertising break. So the ad that'll play first, straight after the traffic report, and then the beer advert might be 3rd or 4th. Okay, so that it plays second to last or last in the ad break. This just gives an appropriate amount of space between the beer ad and the traffic report. Okay, so that negative connotation can be avoided. Okay, so the next step is then that the advertising log created by the traffic manager or the inventory manager is then integrated into the programming schedule, like I just said. The programming schedule includes the music and any programming elements that need to play out. Okay, so at a point we have to merge these two, and this integration uses a broadcast management software system. Again, every commercial radio station has one, and most community radio stations will also have one. We've gone through them. We've given you multiple different options of these playout systems or of these software systems. This is also the software that helps with the management of the licensing rights with program planning and scheduling, and which supports mission critical operations in broadcast management. So ICASA wants your logs. Okay, so ICASA needs to see all the ads that flighted on the station and all the music played on the station, and depending on your license, your programming planning. Some software systems provide end-to-end solutions covering this whole process from clients booking the advert to the playout. Others are area specific, okay, but all are connected to ensure that the booking material is eventually flighted on air. That's what it comes down to. Once the material has been booked, loaded, and integrated into the logs, the material is now ready for you to press play. So full play out. A presenter or a producer will receive a daily log. If one software program is used at a radio station, the log can be fully integrated and be one document, so they can see their music, when to talk, and when to play ads, etc. If several different software programs are used, the music, the advertising, and the programming logs could be different documents. Okay, so you could receive 3 different documents. These documents would then normally be sent electronically, and hard copies or paper logs would be left in the studio for ease of reference. The presenter or the desk controller and the producer are then mandated to play out the material at the scheduled times. Okay, so at the time we give them, they must now play this thing. A lot of broadcasters insist that presenters or producers sign these paper logs as proof of flighting. The producer or the desk controller will initial alongside adverts on the log, and in the case of advertising elements like live reads, they will write down the time that the live read was delivered. This makes it easier for the station to deliver a post-campaign report, okay, which we'll get to later on. So a lot of stations, not all stations, just want you to acknowledge that you have played this thing, okay, without them having to go and pull the actual logs. So the actual radio logs to hear whether it did play. Once the advertising material is played out, a lot of radio stations use reporting software to help reconcile and report on proof of flighting. So again, these systems are so good that at the end of the day, you can pull a log that'll show you exactly what played, okay? So they can show that as proof that everything has played at the times that it should have. A report is generated and sent to the client or the advertiser as proof that the broadcaster has delivered on the agreed upon contract. Many advertisers and media agencies rely on external companies to audit and monitor the output of the radio stations to track their advertising. These are independent companies that examine sales contracts and use them as a reference point to check what airtime was paid for by the client, to determine what was actually flighted on the radio station, and to note when it was aired, as well as when it was supposed to be aired and how it was supposed to be aired. So they can monitor all of this with watermarking of the adverts. Monitoring companies are useful for both monitoring and for collecting of data across an advertiser's entire portfolio. When a client is trying to inspect their total expenses on radio advertising, they need reliable and auditable results to ensure their media investments have been delivered according to the media planning and strategy they produced with their media agencies or through their marketing departments. So that is how the ad would then go to air and show that it's been played from start to end. Okay, so we get it. The traffic manager will receive the information. The traffic manager will load it onto the correct log. The logs will then be integrated into each other if they can. That can then be pulled, it can be sent, it can be printed for the presenters, the desk driver or the producer to make sure that they play it on the correct time, whether they sign there next to it, and then they can sign next to it to acknowledge that they've played the ad, or you can simply pull a log at the end of the day or the next day to show that this is everything that has been played. That will then be sent to station, or you can get a third company to monitor it via watermarking to make sure that the ads have flighted and that the contract in essence has been fulfilled. Most clients will ask about added value or about discount when booking a campaign with you. Okay, sometimes you can give quite a bit of added value depending on how big the client is or how big the campaign is. Other times you might provide smaller added value or no added value depending on what it is, and you might rather want to give them a discount. So what is added value? We have spoken about added value a little bit, specifically with regards to the promotions space. Okay, within the advertising context, though, when we speak about added value, we usually mean the value we add to big commitment deals, as well as the value we add to programming to enhance the investment that a client is putting into the station. So it's just enhancing their investment, so giving them more value for their amount of money. Obviously, as a radio station, you always want to ensure that your client is happy. And by adding some extra value, we can enhance the program quality of their advertising campaign for the listeners, as well as to ensure that they feel like they're getting a great deal. That's what they all want at the end of the day. At the end of the day, is to see that they are getting the best deal for their money. Right, so we're going to look at commitment deals, so upfront deals, and then we'll look at programming value also. A radio station can give clients added value by offering commitment deals. So if you book this over X amount of time, I can give you value of Y on top of what you're getting. So commitment deals or upfront deals, as they refer to in some markets, are agreements that are struck between advertisers and media owners, where advertisers commit to spending or buying on a radio platform upfront. In other words, the advertiser commits to spending a certain amount with a media owner in the upcoming fiscal year, and in turn, the media owner gives the advertiser favorable and discounted rates because of their commitment to spending the money with the business. A lot of radio stations do this. Let's take an example. Let's say, for instance, a really big agency such as the Media Shop might go to SABC once a year to say, we have this for you this year, what can you give us? And the SABC will say, cool, great, we will give you so much extra per month because you are booking with us a year in advance. So we know we are getting this amount of money every single month for a year. Commitment deals help both sides of the spectrum. It helps the media owners and it helps the advertisers. It helps the media owners in the sense that they can see how much revenue will be coming in for a specific time period. So they can ensure that they have enough revenue coming in for the foreseeable future, for instance. This means that they're better able to manage their inventory and they have a better grasp of their financial situation and target tracking early in the financial year. Advertising revenue is normally linked to a campaign-specific budget, okay? So in other words, the advertiser knows how much money they have to spend on a specific campaign or a product launch. That means that it can be difficult for the advertiser to forecast, because there's a lot of things that can happen here. So what if the product does better than they expected in a shorter period of time? Then what could happen is the advertiser could pull their advertising investment as they've already achieved their targets. Or what about the other side of it? What if the advertiser does less well than they forecasted? They might need to purchase more inventory and to extend their campaign to achieve their targets, but the radio station might already be sold out or have a competitor brand commencing their campaign at the end of that period. So you as a brand can't continue to advertise at this specific time. These types of scenarios can make the spending of advertisers very unpredictable. Commitment deals help to stabilize this, okay, to stabilize sporadic spending by getting an upfront financial commitment for the coming fiscal year. Messaging of the campaign and specific details of the spend are discussed during the year. So it's not a case of, great, we know that you are spending 1 million Rand with us this year. We need to know exactly how you're going to spend that right now. It doesn't happen like that. You can talk throughout the year to change mechanics or to change adverts or whatever it is that you want to do. From an advertiser's perspective, the media owners give huge discounts on their airtime for these upfront commitments, which is why big agencies and advertisers are looking to secure these deals, because they know if they can book a year upfront, they will get massive discounts. These commitment deals can range from 20 to 40% discounts on airtime, okay, depending on the size of the committed revenue. It makes good business sense for an advertiser to establish an overall advertising budget, then to identify the media spaces they would like to be in. And finally, to allocate portions of their budget to specific media spaces. So that's AV, added value deals, and and how they would be booked through big agencies along with commercial radio stations. Okay, the second type of value there is programming value. So a radio station can also give clients added value by giving them programming value. This is value that a radio station could give to an advertiser if the station can see a direct benefit to its programming strategy and audience by associating itself with the advertiser's campaign. So for example, an advertiser is advertising a concert that might be taking place in the radio station's broadcast footprint. A broadcast footprint, again, is the geographical area that the radio station can reach through its transmitters, which obviously then gives us an idea of how many people can listen to us. Okay, so broadcast area, footprint. The radio station can identify that a concert that might be happening might appeal to many of their listeners, and it might feature music that they have on the station's music playlist. So the radio station will now recognize that giving the concert more publicity would give them as a station a strong association to the concert and associate their station's brand with the artist and the concert experience. So this in essence then means that it would be of they could add value to the client's concert promotion by doing a few different things. Like for instance, programming informal conversations on air about the concert between presenters, scripting and executing formal conversations about the concert in the form of live reads or power spots, or they can play the ads more often using programming inventory that is kept aside for station-specific use. Okay, this is all added value given to the advertiser by the programming department at no extra cost to the advertiser, because the radio station themselves see value in providing added value to this concert. And that's the two different values, okay? So when we speak about added value, it could be commitment deals, so upfront deals, or it could be programming value, which is from a programming perspective. Now, post-campaign analysis. So this is after everything has been done. Everything is flighted, everything went well. Now we need to do a post-campaign analysis. So this means that we need to do a detailed report of how the radio campaign performed across the radio station's platforms. So if we used radio and we used the radio station's website and we use social media, we will put all of those in there. It details all of the aspects of the campaign, where and when they took place, and whether it was successful or not. Not every campaign is successful. This is the responsibility of the media practitioner who developed and booked the advertising campaign for the client. Through a series of analysis and several tools, the media practitioner can check that the elements were booked, that the elements that were booked were all broadcast at the right time and at the right place. We also get different programs like Telmar that can assist with working out things like reach and frequency. I've also mentioned watermarking a few times. So watermarking is a practice that can help the media practitioner check that adverts were flighted without having to listen themselves and without having to record what was flighted. So this is one way of listening, or one way of seeing whether the ad has been played. Another one is via flighting codes, which we also have spoken about, which help to monitor what went out on air and when. Okay. In addition to this, the media practitioner can work closely with the sales and the programming teams at the radio station to secure recordings of the elements that were flighted and to compile these into a summary report for the client. So as we've seen from a radio audience measurement from RAMS, it's not possible to physically count every single person that have heard an ad on the radio. However, knowing what the objectives are for the campaign up front means that you can measure what you expected to get against what you got. A media practitioner will set objectives up front when they develop the media campaign. These objectives will be in line with what the brand they are planning for desires to achieve. For some brands, it might be the sales lead that's important to them. So for instance, some companies will contact individuals to sell their services, like an insurance company, which gives them the opportunity to determine whether the whether the person has heard about their services. Outsurance, for instance, has structured their advertising so that the listener will SMS them for a quote, okay? They will open a series of different SMS lines and use different numbers for each radio station. So in this way, they can tell how many people are SMSing them for a quote and where those specific listeners have heard about them, okay? Which radio station they heard the ad on. They can then compare which radio stations generated more leads for them, which allows them to shift their advertising budget to the most effective radio stations. Takealot, for instance, has advertised promotions by giving different radio stations specific voucher codes for their listeners. This allows them to see who is buying what when the online shoppers use the voucher code for their purchases. They can then compare how many people logged onto their website per radio station they used to advertise. They can also see the value of a station's audience by looking at the types of items online shoppers are purchasing and the size of their online baskets, for instance, to see how much purchasing power different audiences might have. This all contributes to the efficiency of their media plan, in that they constantly learn where best to put their advertising money to generate the best return on investment, ROI. For other brands, there might be a need to educate the listeners about their products and their services. So they might want to measure whether people understand their products and utilize them in the intended way. When a brand is slightly more complicated in terms of how they are used, a media practitioner can recommend other types of media advertising on the radio to support pre-recorded advertising. These other types of advertising on the radio are constantly evolving, as we are aware. As the lines continue to blur between analog and digital, and between paid for straight commercial airtime and more subtle ways of communicating an advertising message, like product placement or presenter endorsements. A radio station can offer competitions or play games between presenters, even including a client representative or a listener, to help people to understand an advertising message. Interviews that are conducted by presenters may help to discuss a complicated product or service in a more engaging way, and will allow listeners to call or to message their questions in and to continue this discussion. Radio stations can allow presenters to enhance their live reads more organically by allowing them to discuss some of the messages in the live read or to apply their own experiences to the environment. These different tactics help to create an exciting but informative and useful advertising campaign for listeners and for the client. There's an example that I want you to look at on page 403 of Next Level Radio. It's example 10C, and the heading there is explaining complex products on radio, the case of Easy Equities. Okay, so you can do that on your own time. So how would you measure success? How would you measure campaign success? There are different ways in which you can measure campaign success in a post-campaign evaluation. Larger organizations with the research and development budgets will often test a campaign they're planning before they flight it. Research is vital to ensure that companies develop adverts that align with their intended communication and their intended target markets. Remember when we spoke about design planning? Okay, design planning is very important here. So we will first examine pre-testing techniques as they play a role in some post-testing techniques. So for instance, pre-testing techniques can determine the associations, the feelings, and the attitudes that the market has towards the specific brand. Post-testing techniques can then be used to determine whether those associations, those feelings, those attitudes have changed at the end of the campaign. So there are different pre-testing techniques that you can use. Pre-testing techniques or the pre-testing approach is generally called concept testing and can be done in numerous different ways. The first one being free association tests. And this is where the researcher will ask the respondent to say the first thing that comes to mind when they hear the name of a product or a brand. So if I say Coca-Cola, you might say red. Okay. This helps the company to understand what consumers think and what they feel about a brand. The next one then is qualitative interviews. The researcher here will conduct a series of informal interviews where respondents who represent a fair sample of that brand's with respondents who represent a fair sample of the brand's target market. This can be one-on-one interviews or focus groups, okay? Either will work. In these interviews, the researcher will ask a number of questions and the respondents will share their thoughts, their views, understandings, and experiences of a certain product or service. These types of interviews help the advertiser gauge the perception and the understanding of their brand before an advertising campaign even starts. Then we get what's called statement comparison tests. The researcher will ask the respondent to rank some ideas or products in their order of preference to choose between two concepts or rate concepts from a scale of 1 to 5. Then we get comprehension tests. So the researcher will make a statement and check to see if the respondent understands what the message intends to say. This helps the advertiser to craft their message better, to ensure that everyone who hears the advert understands the message. Then there are reaction tests. So tests that will assess the feeling that respondents have towards a specific product or advertisement. Then you get folder tests. The researcher will give a respondent 2 different folders containing advertising material. One folder contains a draft of the relevant brand advert that they're testing, and the other one is an external advert that isn't their brand. They can then see how noticeable and relevant the advert is to the respondent by testing what stood out and whether the respondent can remember the message of the ad. They can incorporate the feedback into the actual advert that they will produce then. It's important to note that there are disadvantages to pre-testing. These types of tests are explicit, which means that we are relying on someone to be honest and having a true reflection of their behavior, which doesn't always happen in a group setting. Okay? In group settings, results can be skewed by groupthink, meaning that 1 or 2 people emerge as leaders and the less confident members of the group will simply follow or agree with their opinions. Okay? Often people are also reluctant to be truthful. So newer testing methods that focus on implicit reactions are being utilized in marketing research more often. While it's rare for a company, even one with a substantial advertising budget, to test a radio advertisement's message and tone will often take its lead from a larger advertising campaign. That way, if the campaign or the concept is pre-tested, the radio advertising element of that concept can clearly utilize the insights gained to make a better advert that is clearly understood and which drives purchasing by the radio audience more effectively. So those were all pre-testing techniques. There are also a couple of post-testing techniques. Once the advert has flighted on the radio, there are numerous different tests that can be done. The first one being the recall test. So quite simply, the researcher asks questions that prompts the respondent to confirm whether they remember seeing or hearing an advert and what message and brand they remember it being about. There are a lot of those going around on Facebook and Instagram, for instance. There's also the sales test. This is a measurement of sales attributable to the campaign. The aim of all product advertising is to make sales. So this is an important component of success in the post-evaluation campaign or post-evaluation report. Then you get attitude tests. So these tests explore whether someone's perception and attitude towards a brand or the product has changed since the beginning of the campaign. So since they've experienced the advert. Then there's expenditure versus effect evaluations. So this is a key factor in post-evaluation success for radio. The client wants to know what the money they put into the campaign has generated. The client wants to know that the money they put into the campaign has generated a profit for them. Sometimes the client will have a target in mind. So for example, a return on investment of 1 to 3, meaning that for every R1 they invested into the advertising campaign, R3 in sales were made. Combining pre and post testing, as well as radio measurement and media data available through proprietary software, radio stations and media practitioners can compile a full picture of a radio campaign, so that the levels of advertising success can be determined. Okay, and that brings us to the end of this chapter, which was about buying and selling of airtime. So we've looked at the role of the media practitioner, who's responsible for developing media plans, managing the relationship with broadcasters and radio stations, negotiating and booking advertising elements on radio, and conducting a post-campaign review for the client once the campaign has been concluded. We've also looked at the on-air sales team, who's responsible for the selling of airtime on a radio station. We looked at commission structures and how the sales team is remunerated, the concept of compensation, and added value that the sales team offers to enhance the deal they have made with the clients to ensure that the objectives are achieved. Okay, so that brings us to the end of buying, selling, and executing airtime, and to the end of this lecture. So with that, I say goodbye. Bye.